De Infinite Way, Joel S. Goldsmith. We vervolgen de klas die Joel gaf op 25 april 1957, de 1957 London Class. Ongeveer 20 minuten nog een vervolg van kant 1, Specific Treatment and Some Question and Answers. Direct gevolgd door de klas die Joel gaf op 26 april 57 met dezelfde titel, Specific Treatment, Some Questions and Answers, duurt ongeveer 40 minuten.
Well, he wasn't thinking then how long a depression could really last if the right man were running it. But I said, no, again, no, I can't take up work beyond that. Why? Well, if you got it, you'd be living on yesterday's manna. That's not a spiritual demonstration. And secondly, how do we know that this man isn't suffering from the depression too, and may be worse off than you are? And what you'd be saying is, let's take it away from him even if he can't afford to let go of it. No, I said, we can't do that. Well, what can we do? I don't know, but I know that we have a formula given us by the Master for spiritual demonstration, and I think we will have to first turn to that. What is it? Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. So I think the first thing we'll have to do is to forgive the man the debt. Well, you know, that was a bomb was dropped. Because he had been counting on that. He'd just been dreaming of collecting it. Well, I'm not a collection agency. And that ends that. I can only give you one remedy. Forgive the man his debts, and let's see what God can do when we are in obedience to God's law. Well, we sat there for quite a while before it dawned on him that whether he liked it or not, that's about what he'd have to do in the end. And so he agreed that he would forgive the man the debt and start over. I said, all right, now we're in the position that manna falls every day. Now we're in the position for whatever manna falls today. Now let's forget the past and let's find out if there's a God now. That's what's important. Is there a God now? Because now that's what we have to look forward to. Well, that very night, that man received a telephone call asking him to do a little part-time job, and he earned enough from that to take care of him for 2 weeks. Before the 2 weeks were up, that man was offered 2 opportunities which he was able to accept and which in 2 years made him a partner in a building firm. There again, you see, there was specific work done, but not to collect a debt, not to get money. The specific work was, what is the law of God with which to face this false appearance? And that's what came through. And so you find that while we work specifically, we don't work specifically to get parking space or to get a new automobile or to get a marriage or to get a home. We work specifically to know the truth regarding any false situation that is presenting itself to us. Now, you'll have lots of opportunity between now and Saturday evening to think that over, and if it brings any further questions to you, to bring them in. Because there's really nothing more important than this subject in our whole agenda. We could well afford to lay everything aside for this. You must specifically know the truth. You must know the truth every day. You must consciously know the truth, but you must have as the object of knowing the truth attaining God awareness and spiritual harmony, not knowing a spiritual truth to get rabbits out of a hat. They won't come unless you put them there. Would you please explain what you meant last night when you said what we hold in consciousness is what we meet in our daily experience? How are we responsible for the acts of others? That's a very, very long and intricate affair, because primarily we aren't responsible for our daily experiences in the sense that we did something we are not responsible in the sense that we have done some specific thing to bring about this situation. In other words, it doesn't mean that if somebody robs me that I've been guilty of robbing somebody. But if somebody robs me, it is definitely the proof that I believe in a selfhood apart from God. I have not become reconciled to my brother, as I was told to do in Matthew. And because I believe there is on earth a thief, I naturally attract to myself the fulfillment of my own belief. I remember a time when the question was asked of Mrs. Eddy, will you ever be a millionaire? And this was in her early days. And her answer was, not as long as I believe there is a pauper on earth. In other words, until I can become reconciled to my brother and recognize that everyone potentially is an heir of God, joint heir with Christ, I myself will be subject at least to lack and limitation. So it is. I must be reconciled to my brother. If I believe that the powers of tyranny, dictatorship, and all the rest of these things are real and true and have power, I risk the fact that I will ultimately be brought under them. If, however, I see that man in his true nature is spiritual and that the qualities of dictatorship, tyranny, so forth and so on, are not real, are not power, are not God-maintained, not God-sustained, I not only remove myself from coming under such dominion, but I help that very tyrant to get free of those qualities, because he no more wants to be a tyrant than we want him to be. I learned in my prison experience years ago, there is no such thing in all this world as a criminal. There isn't in all this world a man who wants to steal or cheat or lie or defraud. When they do those things, they believe that at that moment there's nothing else for them to do. There's no other way out. And if they become habitual criminals, it's because they believe that there's no opportunity for them to reform in this society, and so they have to keep on doing what they're doing. But in their heart and in their soul, they don't want it. And they wish there were a way out. And I have been able to help them, many of them, by showing them that very thing, that in themselves they are not criminals. They themselves have the same integrity toward the property of their fellow man as we have. Only some circumstance in their life started them on this path that they cannot get away from. Now, it is in this same way dictators weren't born dictators, they were made that way. Circumstances turned them in that direction. In their heart and in their soul, they have the same desire to live without a fear of assassination that we have. Never think for a moment that it isn't true, heavy lies the head that wears a crown. Don't doubt for a minute that these dictators aren't aware of the fact that their own lives are as much in jeopardy as the lives that they are jeopardizing. They'd love to be free of that. I'll bet you every man in the upper realms of Russia would like the privilege that we have of walking on the streets of London and hiding in the crowd and not feeling that in every crowd there's a few there that would just like to if they dared, and a few who would dare if they got the chance. No. Now let's remember this. In our inner nature, we are pure regardless of what offenses we commit. We don't want to commit them. We wish the circumstances were such that we didn't have to, or that a power would enter our soul to free us from the desire. We all wish that, but we haven't found the way. But in order for me to be at one with the law of God, I have to know that and feel that about everyone on this earth. So that if I have become reconciled to my brother, there is nothing in my consciousness that is going to attract to me the discords, the inharmonies of human relationships. In the same way, many years ago, a man drove me every Thursday on my rounds, and he prided himself on being one of the finest drivers on the road. Actually, he was one of the poorest I've ever ridden with. But he had an idea that he was really good. But you know what the trouble was, of course. All the other drivers on the road were terrible. That's what was wrong with him. They just wouldn't let him alone. Well, one day he said, "Why is it that you're so at peace with all of these terrible drivers around here? Aren't you afraid of an accident or of your life?" And so I explained to him how I had become reconciled to my brother in World War I. And I said, once you agree that God is the mind of everyone, God is the soul of everyone, whether they know it or not, you're at peace, because you're not dealing with them, you're dealing with God, the mind of them. And you find it really works. And he was a student, he thought about it, and gradually he tried to think along that line, that these weren't bad drivers. Actually, they had the mind of God, even if they didn't know it. But you know, a few weeks later he said to me, "You know, it works, they're doing better driving." Oh, we are so busy reforming and healing somebody. Physician, heal thyself. Be reconciled with thy brother. Be reconciled with truth. Begin to understand that you must approach life with one word on your lips all of the time, and that word is God. No matter what the circumstance out here, start with the word God, and you'll see what a different picture you'll get. Instead of thinking man, then of course you have to think good, bad, drunk, sober, capable, incapable, honest, dishonest. Start with the word God and realize, oh, God constitutes you. God forms you in his own image and likeness. God is the Father of you. God is the life of you. God is the soul, the spirit, the mind. Even your body is the temple of the living God. Then you see law, and the first thing you know, there's no law but one. Spiritual law is the only law. Spiritual law. There's no other law. All else is an imitation, counterfeit, human belief. But spirit, that is law. And again you'll see powers. Come back to God. Well, there's only God power, spiritual power, spiritual power. And then you'll see sick life or dead life. And again you'll come back to God. God is the only life. And you watch how that reconciles you to your brother. It reconciles you to the law of God. And you know what? You wake up and find, like we have here, that in over an hour we haven't asked God for a thing. And I've had students tell me, all of a sudden they woke up and found that a whole day had gone by and they hadn't asked God for a thing or expected anything of God, and yet good was flowing. Now, so it is. You don't have to ask God for anything except more light, more light, more light. Oh, God, more light, more light, more light. Wider horizons, broader vision. But that's all. For the rest, trust God to run its own universe. Now, I have a note here. Only trials and tribulations compel us to surrender human peace and material good for spiritual awareness. And there is the subject on which hinges the higher unfoldment of our teaching. In the first and earliest stages, you will find that your highest desire is to exchange your sickness for health, your lack for abundance, your unhappiness for happiness. But you'll find that that's only the baby steps of spiritual truth. The spiritual unfoldment begins when you say, no, Lord, not more matter or better matter, but how about the kingdom of God and its righteousness? What is the spiritual life like? Not just more human life or better human life. What is the life of God on earth like? What is the soul of God lived on earth like? Then you are coming into the higher realm of spiritual living, which leads to the mystical experience, the marriage, conscious union with God. And so we leave it there until tomorrow night and see what will unfold for us then in the way of...
Dan nu de klas die Joel gaf op 26 april 97, opnieuw Specific Treatment en Some Questions and Answers.